What podcasting is really good for is, feels like kind of cliched. If you spend much time reading my content or people in the podcasting space, the term can be a bit cliched, but it's about kind of like...
I think video does make a pretty big difference, and I think it's pretty easy to make video look good. And the way you make video look good is that...
So you're using a lot of your kind of like marketing juice, your content efforts to make a podcast. It's unlikely to have a positive ROI because it's going to take...
Podcasting is like, I just think one of the biggest hacks in anything you're trying to achieve in your life. We are back with another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast, where we answer real and sometimes insane Reddit questions about growing your startup. And today we're joined by Harry Morton, the CEO of Lower Street. Lower Street is a podcast production company creating some of the best podcasts on the internet with some of the biggest names and brands in the world like Sam Parr, Pepsi, Stanford, and even me. Harry also created my old podcast, Unicorn Launcher, which had over 1 million impressions, won a bunch of awards and topped the charts, which was terrific for my ego. And that was all just because Harry is an expert storyteller. So let's jump into it. Welcome, mate. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Awesome, mate. Well, I just want to jump straight into these questions. So we've never had someone with your kind of like podcasting expertise before. So I've gone real podcast heavy on these questions.
Awesome.
Even though I know you've started and you run a business, you know, your expertise is so heavily in this podcasting space. So this first question is, starting a podcast, is it worth it? I have an idea for a business, and starting a podcast came to mind as a way we should get started. I did some research and there are some other podcasts already. Is it actually worth putting in all the work and starting one, even though I have zero experience making podcasts? This is from Mima 2021.
Yeah, nice. So that added context does make a difference, right? Because it's basically, should I start a podcast to start my business? I think probably my short answer is no, but now I'll give a much longer example. I don't know how you found the impact of Unicorn Launcher or for you guys at Vigo, because strategically it was different. You already had a business, you were growing, and it was kind of a part of that strategy. But it was still was like, you know, you were in the start. You were a startup still, and so it was kind of a part of that. I think that like what podcasting is really good for is like, feels like kind of cliched. If you spend much time reading my content or people in the podcasting space, the term can be a bit cliched, but it's about kind of like authentic, intimate connection with an audience. And so it's really good at building meaningful relationships. It's really good at getting people to like the whole know, like, and trust, but like the really going deep on the like and the trust part. So in terms of like making your best customers even more loyal, it's amazing. In terms of like building your network and connecting, so like you and I are having a chat right now, and this is a really great way of building a relationship between us. That's really good. The loyalty you get from people that like listen to a show, they tend to stick with a podcast for a really long period of time. But like what it's really crap at is hyper, like it's not a viral medium. It's not like a Reddit post where you could suddenly like just like hit the front page of Reddit for some reason because something just goes viral, or a TikTok campaign that like explodes overnight. It doesn't happen in podcasting. Like I guess it could happen in theory, but it's like not viral. The reason for that is it's super word of mouth based. So people search for a podcast because they've been recommended it by a friend or whatever. Yes, the algorithms inside of Spotify, and if you could call Apple an algorithm, there's that, and obviously YouTube as well. But like generally speaking, podcasts are still growing by word of mouth, and what that means is you're not going to reach a massive group of people in a short period of time. And because of that, it's not very good at the early stages of business where what matters is making money, right? Like your job when you're starting a company is to get customers who are willing to pay you for the thing that you do. And so if you're using all of because podcasting is a lot of work, as you know, so you're using a lot of your kind of like marketing juice, your content efforts to make a podcast, it's unlikely to have a positive ROI because it's going to take 3, 6, 9, 12 plus months to really start to get any kind of meaningful traction. So for the vast majority of people, it's probably not the best move. Now, the where it is really great, as I mentioned, like it's great for building relationships by networking. So like a lot of people use it for building relationships one-to-one with their guests. So if like what is strategically important for you is building a network where you don't have one already, then podcasting can be really worth your time. And you almost don't care if anyone listens is kind of like the way that strategy plays out. It's just like, I want to speak to, I don't know, let's call it VCs or CEOs in my industry, I want them to know that I exist. I want to build that relationship and that network. And like doing one or two of those conversations a week is like absolutely worth my time, even if no one listens to the podcast. Then I think then podcasting can be great, because then you've got like a bunch of content you can repurpose for social. And the main point is that you're chatting to these people one-on-one. So I think in that case, it's a good fit. But if you're using podcasting to get your brand out there, to get customers, then it's probably not the fit. It's much, much better suited to like established brands that want to build on their brand rather than build on like pipeline tomorrow.
Yeah. I love that you covered both lenses here. So I think about podcasting a lot. I just fucking love podcasting. Podcasting is like, I just think one of the biggest hacks in anything you're trying to achieve in your life.
Yeah.
And I just to kind of like echo the sentiment of what you have here is like, I think that there are two reasons to do a podcast, and 99% of people think about one of them, which is to build an audience.
Right.
And so one reason for a podcast is building an audience, and the other one in my mind is to build relationship with guests.
Yeah.
So I always just think about like, is this an audience or a guest podcast? Now, if you're looking to start a podcast to build an audience, like that is a huge waste of time. There's already so many critical mass podcasts out there that you're going to really struggle to compete with that. And it will take, you said like it might take a year if you're lucky, and the content's fucking great. Like to build an audience is so close to impossible that like, it's just a bad idea to make that your focus. But that's not why I do podcasts. I do 3 podcasts. I do this personal podcast, and then I have 2 for my business because they're so damn effective for my business. So starting a podcast isn't worth it. It's wildly worth it for whatever you're trying to do. If I was looking to get a job in a new industry, I would start a podcast called Getting a Job in AI. If I was looking to like start a business in health tech, I would call it like the Health Tech Podcast. It doesn't matter, right? And I'd find out who are the people I need to know. It's all the health tech VCs. And then every single week I would just interview a ton of them. And like you said, Harry, you don't care about who listens to it. So if you don't care about who listens to it, your production quality can be pretty low. Like some podcasts are pretty lo-fi. You can just have the conversation, smack some audio, music on the front and the end, and that's actually okay for a podcast. If you want to go for audience, then you need very high quality production. But if you're going to go for guests, I think you can have a much more intimate, real conversation. And I just think absolutely do that. You should be doing it. And I have this assumption. I'm keen to see what you think of this, Harry. I think in 5 years, so like, by 2030, I think every smart person will have a podcast. Like everyone who's like kind of like towards the top of career of a podcast, like of like a career, will have a podcast. And people are going to look at like a podcast kind of like a designer's portfolio.
Right. That's kind of to an extent, that's the thesis that I'm kind of building my company on. Like the way I talk about it is that podcasting right now is kind of like social media in the early 2000s, or like SEO in the like early noughts. It's like, it's a thing that like everyone's dipping their toe in, or a lot of brands are dipping their toe in, because obviously all I deal in is brands, right? So like we're talking here about kind of making a podcast for yourself. It might be for a company, it might be for you. For your personal brand, but like broadly speaking, we're generally making shows for brands. And like I believe that in the same way that every company realized they had to have a website by the early noughts, I think every company's going to realize they need a podcast in the next sort of 5 years. So I'm really bullish on it. But what I would say is that like it's I would push back on, maybe not push back's the right word, but just sort of add on to what you were saying in terms of like how hard it is to grow an audience. I think firstly I would say that, so I want to reiterate what I said. It's slow. It's not like a quick growth thing, but I will say it's definitely possible to grow an audience if you have like a truly differentiated premise and concept for your show, if you invest in the production values of it, and if you make it different. So you mentioned at the top, we're working on a show with Sam Parr. Now, I appreciate what I'm about to say is sort of caveated by the fact that we have it's at least in part hosted by a guy who has a large following already. But the show itself is growing really well, and that's in part because of the format. It's like a really differentiated concept, and it's and we it's not just like an unfiltered conversation back and forth. There's like storytelling, there's narrative, much like we did for Unicorn Launcher. So and so I do think that like investing in making something really good. That show's called Money Wise, by the way. And like, so the thing that's interesting about it is like we interview millionaires and billionaires about what it's like to manage their money. That stands out as a thing. People don't talk about that publicly. So that's like interesting. And then the format is storytelling. So that helps it stand out. So I think if you invest in those things, you do stand out, because like I would say the average in podcasting is like someone jumping on a Zoom call and having an unfiltered conversation for 45 minutes and then uploading the result with basically zero editing. You know, that's fine. And to your point, if all you want to do is network and you just need to call it a podcast to give people an excuse to say yes to you, great. But like, if you want to make an audience and like make it a real like podcast, then kind of going that extra mile is a difference, and you immediately stand out in the top 1% even, because like no one's actually making that effort to do something different. So I do think it's possible. The other thing I would say is that also you don't need a big audience necessarily for it to be really impactful for you. So it might be that you're like a B2B SaaS company or whatever, and like really all you need is like 500 marketers from your particular industry to listen to your podcast for that to have like a really big impact. So yeah, I stand by what I said. It's slow to grow an audience, but I also would say that like it's not impossible to grow an audience, and maybe you don't even need a big audience for it to like, for your audience to be valuable to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Look, I guess I'm being a little hyperbolic. I don't think it's impossible to build an audience, but I do think it's hard and it's slow. And
yeah,
like I would say if you're doing the podcast, which is that you're jumping on a Zoom call and recording, then it's impossible to build an audience. Like people expect more than that.
Yeah, agree.
But if you have, you know, quality production value and you know, an interesting premise and a format and like really just a differentiated offering, then it's definitely possible, but it's still slow. And you know, we put a fuckload of effort into the Unicorn Launcher podcast that we worked on with you guys, and that went really well. But that was like super differentiated and so much effort. It was 18 months of content.
Yeah.
And everything recorded boiled down to 8 like half an hour episodes.
So it was intense. It was a lot of work. And by the way, anyone listening should go and listen to it if they haven't already, because like it would be a good way of getting to know you better, like intensely getting to know you better. It's like it was so personal, and like that's why it was awesome. So, and that's why it stood out, right? And got 1 million impressions and did all that stuff. So yeah. But it was a shitload of work, wasn't it? Yeah.
So like but I think if I strip that all back, like I'm just so bullish on getting started in the podcasting space. And I'm pretty vehemently against just recording a Zoom call and sticking that up like that. That's terrible. Like you need a bit of thought into it, but it's so much easier than you think, because you don't need to be, to begin with, if it's just for guests, you don't need to be all the way at the you know, the 18-month narrative full production level. You should be a little bit above the Zoom call. Like there's stages that you can get to, but I think it's a lot easier than you think. And the value you will get out of those relationships early running a business are so important. You'll know all the VCs, you'll know all the competitors, you'll know all the potential customers. Like it's just,
and they'll know you.
I'm so
the important part, you know.
Exactly. And I guess like one thing that I didn't mention, and you didn't mention it either, but you kind of alluded to it. You said like, you know, if you need it as an excuse for someone to say yes to have a conversation with you, if you ask someone to come on a podcast, they're so much more likely to sit down with you than if you ask them for a coffee.
100%.
So I'm constantly able to get in calls with like best-selling authors or Shark Tank sharks or billionaires, which they would just say no. I don't have the social capital to have those conversations.
Yeah.
But if I say come on my podcast, they're just like, yeah, sure. It doesn't matter if I have no listeners. It doesn't matter anything. They don't even care what the podcast is. There's just a reason. There's an excuse and an anchor.
Yep. 100%.
Well, starting a podcast, MEMA 2021, it is worth it. But if you aim it correctly. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Pretty good follow-on question here.
Awesome.
This one is called, what do I need to start a podcast? I'm thinking about starting my own podcast, but really not sure what equipment or programs I'll need to get started, or where to even start with format, etc. Where do I go? This is from Past Selection 9278.
Yeah. So gear-wise, it's really straightforward. Like you can be set up for like a couple $100. Like like we said before, don't jump on Zoom and record with your like built-in microphone and all that shit. Like it's gonna look crap and it's gonna sound terrible. Video is increasingly talked about in podcasting, so people obsess about that, but you can spend so much money and time and effort on getting like a really pro video setup.
Let's pause on video, because I've got a question fully about video.
Okay, great. Well, that's awesome. All I'm saying is I don't think it's like essential. I think what's essential is like doing the podcast itself to the point we just made, it doesn't have to be all the bells and whistles. So don't obsess over video early doors. If you make your background look cool, I mean, even the first versions of this show, you just had like a Zoom background, green screen, exactly. So you don't have to go full thing on that. But on audio, you can be really. So I've got like really professional mic. I'm in a studio that's treated. I've got like sound panels everywhere, so it sounds not too echoey, reverberant. Got a really nice like sound thing. But you could be set up with a Shure MV7 microphone for like, I can't remember how much they are, like $150, let's say, US. And it just is USB, plug straight in. It looks the part. It looks cool. It looks like you're on a podcast, and it sounds really good. And it's super easy. So that's what you need. And then you need a platform to record on that's not Zoom. So right now we're on Riverside. Wistia have a new product coming out. There's Squadcast owned by Descript, who's like an open AI company. There's a bunch of platforms you record on, but the point is they record at really high quality. You don't need to even understand how they do it. Doesn't matter. It's just very, very straightforward. So like getting it to sound good enough is like very, very easy. And then I'm not sure that I can't remember the rest of the question, but basically it's around like how to make the show, like how to come up with the idea. Cause like, I think what I touched on before is like standing out is really important. So I think it's really good to kind of go around and listen, not just to like other shows in your space, the shows that you're kind of competing with, but looking at like other shows in tangential spaces or completely other spaces and looking for inspiration of like, you know, if you want to make a podcast about AI, but you found this podcast about blockchain from 5 years ago that has this really cool format that you think is interesting, well, just steal it, like copy it, like do your own version of that, because it's never going to be exactly the same and it's in a different niche.
I did that for this podcast.
There you go. Awesome. Tell me more about that.
There's a podcast that I love called Not Another Dungeons and Dragons podcast, and they have it's not the whole episode, but they have one episode a month, which is around like D&D court, where they like get people right in about like this thing's happening, like give me a judgment on it, and I just like,
okay, like resolve our argument kind of thing.
Exactly. And I was just like, cool. So I was like, that'd be a great format.
That's awesome, man. So you played D&D? I've never done it, but I know a bunch of people that are into
I've only ever played one round of D&D in my whole life, and we'd had about 15 beers, and it was at a Bucks party. It was so much fun though.
Yeah, but okay, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I could get around it. It was pretty fun. From what I remember, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's great, but that's perfect though, right? Like, no one's ever going to accuse a startup podcast of having stolen the format from a D&D show. Like, it just isn't going to be a thing until now. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's right. You know, you need those ideas to, like I said before, to be in that top 1%. You just need to figure out like a way to differentiate and have something that's like, you just have to. I think it's really, really easy to be like, this sounds like I'm going to interview these experts and on these topics, and that's just going to inherently be interesting. The thing is, like, there's already 20 podcasts doing that, so like you're going to be incredibly boring by doing that. You have to think like, would I listen to this if it wasn't my show? Like, if I wasn't recording this thing, would I actually spend the time to listen to it? And the answer is almost certainly no, unless you're making something really, really good. So just think about like, what would that be? What would interest you? What would be truly like different? What does not exist that, you know? And sometimes it's not even like the topics, it's the format, it's the way that it's put across that makes it like super entertaining or fun, or like you're getting news in a way that you're not getting it somewhere else, or there's an opinion, you know, like I really appreciate this person's view on the world, and that's interesting to me. You've just got to have some form of like actual differentiation.
So I agree 100% on the equipment side of things. Like, equipment can be very easy. Like my setup's pretty expensive, but that's just because over time I added a mic and then an interface and then a camera and then lights and painted my wall. Like, that shit's unnecessary. But when I first started podcasting, we just bought a microphone from like the closest kind of like shopping center to us. It cost us $100.
Right.
And it wasn't the best audio, but it was significantly better than like recording on your laptop computer. So it made a big difference. And then I think you can get away. I think you can get away without video, but I think video does make a pretty big difference. And I think it's pretty easy to make video look good. And the way you make video look good is that you record on your phone. It's so easy to record on your phone. Yeah. Phones have amazing cameras, and use a virtual background. So I use a virtual background, and then that's just enough. But if you can buy like a $50 light, like a ring light or something like that, and like that's like way better than most people. Now, let me clarify. I'm not talking for audience. I'm just talking for guests. So if I'm just thinking about a guest, interviewing guest, I like video because it makes it seem a little bit more professional. I want to
Mm-hmm.
seem like I've got more social capital than I do in that setting. So I like having a nice-ish setup. It cost me like $100 or $200 or something like that. I think that's worth it.
Yep.
Then as far as like how to get started with format, you said that like, a good premise, an interesting premise can put you in the top 5%, top 1%. I saw this statistic, which is like only 5% of podcasts get to 20 episodes.
Mm.
So like people give up on podcasts so quickly,
Yep.
which means if you just don't give up, you will become better than most, like nearly all podcasts, just by continuing. Because when
Yep.
you start, you will suck as a host. Like go back, find my old episodes, you will see it. Like over time, you just get better.
Mm-hmm.
So I always just say start with a podcast format that is a low barrier to entry for you. So if you get like, I'm going to research all the news, I'm going to have super interesting takes on it, and it's taking you 10 hours to prep for an episode, you'll do that for the first few and it's going to be fun. But after 5 episodes, it's going to be a lot of effort, and you're going to see that you still have no listeners, and you're going to be like,
Yep.
fuck this, I'm out.
Yep.
So I just think, again, and this is just guest podcasts. Audience podcasts are different. You need the interesting premise. I just want like the easiest thing. So if you decided that you just need to build relationships with people in your industry, you can have a pretty shitty format, but just make it interesting. Think about how you want to build the relationship, craft the right questions so it's, you have the right kind of beat, so you build a nice relationship with that person, and make it so you have to do minimal prep so that you can have lots and lots of conversations. Because in that world, it's about actually having more conversations than it is about quality of episode when it's just about guests. So I think just keep it as simple as possible if you're going after that guest route that I suggest.
Yep.
Because it's so easy to give up.
No, I think that's fair. I will say though that like that top 5% making it past. It used to be 7%, but maybe that's changed. Of like of podcasts that make it past 20 episodes or whatever is definitely true. But there's still a ton of like a lot of podcasts that have done hundreds of episodes but still have like a few hundred downloads per episode, right? So like it's not like it doesn't, just sticking to it puts you in the top 5% in one aspect, but not really, if you know what I mean. But what I would also say, by the way, is that like the top 5%, to be in the top 5% of all podcasts, often that's measured by downloads, just the number of like impressions the show gets. And you can be in the top 5% with like hundreds of downloads per episode, not even thousands, right? So like it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a big if you stick around for 250 episodes and you're in the top 5% of podcasts, that might just be a podcast that's downloaded 500 times an episode, which, like, by the way, again, if that's 500 other people, that can be awesome. So there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. I'm just saying, like, it's important to keep that all in context.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try and summarize here. What do you need to get started from an equipment standpoint? Not a lot.
Yep.
Pretty cheap mic. You can get them for $100, $150. I recommend for a visuals podcast setup, you just need your phone. A tripod would be great, a light, and you can get away with that, and just a virtual background. That will make a big difference.
Yep.
And then format, what do you need to get started? It depends what you're aiming for, but effectively you just need a format that works for your show. So if you're looking for something to build an audience and to build quality content over time, then you want something that actually is truly differentiated, and you can just take it from someone else, take inspiration from elsewhere. Don't copy a podcast, but copy elements of a podcast from different areas, and that's interesting to you, and then take your own twist on it. You're creating, right? Create something that's fun for you.
Yep.
But keep in mind that my personal experience is that, like, after 5 episodes, you get bored of making something. Like, the novelty wears off.
Yeah.
So make sure you're doing something that's not a crazy amount of work. Like, you want to keep the barrier to entry like as low as possible.
I think that's fair. But again, and I would just, like, through all of that, just ask yourself, would I listen to this if it wasn't my show?
Yeah, that's fair.
I think not enough people do that.
I think that's true. I think that's true, but I also don't think, like, and we can just disagree on this, which is totally fine, right? Like, there's a show that I've been a part of in the past that I wouldn't listen to, but by all means, it served the purpose we were aiming for, because it was purely about getting 50 relationships with guests in a quick amount of time, and we got it. I've never gone back and listened to it, and no one listens to it, but I don't care.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I should say that with the, again, if networking is your goal, all of these rules kind of go out the window.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally. That's fair.
All right. Okay, then we'll move on to our last question, which is, are video podcasts more successful than audio only? Right now, I don't have the space to set up a background to do a video recording. I would love to eventually work up to that point. But I'm not sure if I should go all in on the video to begin with, because I'm not sure, are video podcasts really more successful, or is audio the right place to start from Soul Revival? Now, this is talking more about like the starting point, but I'm just generally interested, like, about video versus audio. So that's just kind of what I want your feedback on, right? Like, how are you thinking about video versus audio?
I'm thinking a lot about it, and it's still. I was just at a conference in New York recently called On Air Fest, and there was a Bloomberg day before it. It's called the Business Podcast Summit, or the Podcast Business Summit. And I mean, basically, the no one in podcasting has a really firm answer. It seems to me. It feels like there's a lot of people seeing success with video, and they're talking about it, but as an industry, we're really like trying to adapt to this. Like, YouTube's gone hard at it in the last year or so, and everyone's talking about, oh, this is where the growth opportunity is for podcasting. But podcasting is an audio medium first. That's where it's come from, and so everyone's trying to adapt and figure out what their sort of video strategy should be. Basically, what I can see from all of the shows that we work on is that video does not add incremental growth to a lot of shows. So I'm talking specifically branded B2B shows. It's really not. Now, does that mean you shouldn't do video? Not necessarily. But I think that, like, it's very easy to see it as like what podcasting is, the way that you should do it, and a huge opportunity for growth or discovery and stuff. But actually, based on experience, it's not. So okay, so what do I think? So there's a few different areas. Firstly, video. So we just talked about Unicorn Launcher, the show we made with you, which is like a really deep storytelling show. We work on MoneyWise, which has like narrative and storytelling elements to it. Lots of other shows like that. If you want to make the video version of that show, that is a huge undertaking, like, because it's a very different thing. Like, if we made a video version of Unicorn Launcher, which is based on tons of different interviews from loads of different places and voice notes and all this kind of stuff, you're essentially making a Netflix documentary, right? Like, that's a big project. And typically those things cost literally millions of dollars. So like that's like not a thing that you want to do. So, but the level of quality of show we were able to make is something that rivals the BBC, NPR, ABC in Australia. Like, this is like a really like broadcast quality piece of audio content. But then suddenly, if you want to turn that into video, it just becomes this behemoth of a project. So one of the amazing things about audio is that you can make something truly like world class in a manageable amount of time and money. Also, the way that we consume audio only is very different to the way that we consume video. So it's like audio, you can listen to it passively. You can listen to it while you're driving, while you're at the gym. You can reach people at times when they're otherwise unreachable by content. And so there are many strengths to audio only that video doesn't provide. And my fear is that as we run to video, because everyone's talking about video and we think about the sort of discovery opportunity on YouTube, is that we'll leave behind all these wonderful storytelling formats that actually make podcasting amazing, which makes audiences give a shit and actually spend the time to listen to it and care about the show. We'll lose that because the format of video forces you down this one-on-one interview format, which we're doing right now, and it's amazing. It serves that purpose. But like we said before, if you want to stand out from all the other interview shows, you've got to do something different. So I slightly worry about the future of podcasting if we all lean into video, because I think what we're going to get is just a sea of chat shows. And like I say, they're great, but we don't necessarily need hundreds of millions more chat shows. But video is amazing for repurposing onto social media. Video is amazing for, you do have that opportunity for discovery on YouTube. Again, what I would say on the discovery piece, like I said, we haven't seen incremental lift on any of our shows that are video, at least not significantly. And the reason for that is that when you're on YouTube, we go, oh, YouTube's this huge audience. There's billions of people searching for all this stuff. Like, discovery is amazing. The algorithm's really good and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but that means you're competing with Mr. Beast, and you're competing with like everything else that's on YouTube, you're competing with. So Justin Jackson, who's the founder of Transistor, had like a rant on maybe it's unfair to call it a rant, had a chat on LinkedIn, on YouTube recently, and he's like, I think people in podcasting kind of misdiagnosing the opportunity of podcasting, because eventually when you put your podcast on YouTube, you're competing with music videos, with documentaries, with sports content, with everything that's out there, product reviews, all this kind of stuff. And so it can look really enticing. We're like, oh man, think about all of like the new discovery we can get there. But it's like, yeah, but people have actually got to discover you, and like they're sitting down on their TV to watch, YouTube Shorts or whatever. I don't know. Do people watch YouTube Shorts on the TV? Probably not. But anyway, you get the idea. Okay, let me summarize that all in a sentence to say, I think YouTube video for podcasting is great if the format naturally fits it. If your audience are actually hanging out on YouTube and you know that they're there looking for content like yours, and that you can really feel like you can do a very, very good job of nailing your titles, nailing your thumbnails, nailing your hooks and your intros, so that you actually are able to compete with the really high quality stuff there. As with before, with the other questions that we've sort of covered here, like there is the caveat that like, if all you want is to record content that you could split up into a bunch of different things and put across all your different channels, great, record video, awesome. Yeah, but it's also very difficult to maintain that level of quality you do in audio in the video, as we discussed in the last question. So I don't know if that's a coherent rant, but maybe that answers some.
I think it's just
questions.
really good context, right? Like, because I think about it a bit as well, and Unicorn Launch is a really good example. Like for those of you who haven't listened to it, probably most of you, it's like a really highly produced narrative arc. So if you've heard like the Serial podcast or the Startup podcast by Gimlet, even just think about those, right? Like visuals wouldn't lend themselves to those podcasts, and it's because like, what would you look at? And it's like that is the Netflix documentary, and that's not what that is, right? That's just a very different medium. So, but then you look at other podcasts like Joe Rogan or Colin and Samir, and video lends himself well. But I think video only ever lends itself well to like in-person conversations, and that's where like you see like a good job of it. Okay, so if your podcast is an in-person conversation, I think video can look good there. But even if you're like trying to do any edits in that, having video gets all chopped up and fucked up, and you can't really even use video then. So you need to have like pretty much unscripted, unedited conversations, which I'm down for. I like those kind of conversations, but I just think like video only lends itself well to some versions and mediums or formats of podcasts. I use video, and like I think this would be one of my best video podcasts because you've got a great setup and I've got a great setup. But the thing is, like when you're doing video as well, it looks best if you're in person. But if you're in person, then you're also like limiting your opportunities, because like how much can you really travel? That makes it a whole lot more expensive and a lot harder to like logistically to organize stuff like that. So I think video is hard. I think discoverability is maybe there, but yeah, I'm experimenting with it, but I'm also not sold on video right now either.
Yeah. What are you seeing on your show? Like, are you getting significant downloads on YouTube?
I probably get more downloads on YouTube than audio.
Oh, that's cool.
So sometimes not actually. Like it's like I'm not just like holy shit, YouTube's the answer.
Right.
And like my short form content gets way more than my long form content. But the thing is, like, content for YouTube is content for YouTube, right? Like
exactly.
It's like, and like sometimes I think like maybe I should make content for YouTube because like I know I could write a great script and I could like show a thing, like whatever it is. But like I like the conversations, right?
Exactly.
And, like, that's
that's
a different
right.
thing.
But I think that's totally the point, because this is the point I've been making recently, is that if you have to think natively. Like if you want your show to succeed on YouTube, you have to think, what is the job to be done of a YouTube podcast on the topic of a conversation between two people about podcasting? It's different. That's probably, I would imagine, a 15-minute, tightly edited, like boom, boom, boom. Here's what you're going to learn in this episode and why it's valuable, and like delivering those points. That is not a 30 to 45-minute conversation. That's a podcast, which probably works best in audio. And sure, you can watch us talk if you want to see our faces and stuff like that. But like, that's not that option. Having that option is great, but that's probably not going to lead to a ton of discovery, because that the YouTube version of that show should be a 15-minute, highly edited, completely different style of thing. And so I think the podcasts that are going to like smash it with video are the ones that can lean into that and just literally make almost two completely different products.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or you just have like, right, like the video podcasts that are just like, some people just nail it on that. They're just conversations like Colin and Samir. They interview YouTubers on YouTube. Right?
yeah,
Like
exactly. So of course
it's
it
a
makes
perfect
sense for them.
format.
Yeah,
Or like Impulsive is like YouTubers chatting with like celebrities. It's like cool that all their audiences are already there and stuff like that. So,
right.
or Joe Rogan, who was just there before everyone else. So like sometimes
Exactly.
it works, but
By
like,
the way, a lot of what made Joe Rogan big back in the day was not his like 2.5 hour like untouched interviews. It was like the clips that he pulled of like 12 to 15 minute clips of like Elon Musk smoking a joint, Elon Musk talking about the future of AI, you know, whatever, like those very like clickbaity titles and like short segments where they cover a specific topic. Like that's what worked really well for Joe Rogan in the early days. It wasn't just like putting his conversations on YouTube that won.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's a really good use of video, right? So like out of this,
Yeah.
we've had 3 separate questions. We could probably, chop those 3 questions into 3 videos and even tighten them up a little bit. You go, cool, you got 3 8-minute videos. That kind of works for
Exactly.
YouTube, but that's more
Agreed.
effort.
Yep. 100%.
All right, well, Soul Revival, video versus audio. It's like just definitely audio and maybe video.
Yep. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for questions. So the last section is plugs. So Harry, anything you want to plug at the moment? Anything
you want to plug?
Like any of your own services or anything you've listened to or read recently?
What have I listened to or read? Well, the thing I want to plug is Moneywise. It's a show that I work on with Sam Parr and his company Hampton, and I'm hosting a lot of the episodes. It's a lot of fun, and we interview rich people around. The premise of the show is that like there's a ton of content out there that helps you to make money. It tells you how to get rich, but no real content out there for like what to do with your money once you've made some. So that's kind of what it is. We're talking with like ultra rich people, and they share their numbers really candidly about how much they've got, where they invest it, all that kind of stuff. So that's really cool. If people are into that, they should go and check it out. But yeah, what am I into? Like, it's so funny because I just went on this rant about like YouTube and how that's not where podcasts should necessarily focus their energy, but like it's where I spend just an insane amount of my time.
Same.
So it's kind of like it's kind of hilarious, but I don't know if I have much to recommend over there because I'm just into like super nerdy stuff. Like you've got all these synthesizers behind me. I just like watching like nerds on synthesizers and stuff on YouTube. So that's kind of my life.
I'm super in a like a deep rabbit hole on YouTube right now of people like using looping machines and like creating music, looping music, and I'm like, I love that shit. So
yeah.
Check out Marc Rebier. That's my quote.
Marc Rebier is amazing. I'm a big fan of Marc Rebier. He's awesome.
Matt, all right, we're both plugging Marc Rebier.
Yeah, he's sick. He's great.
Awesome. All right, well, mate, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing all your expertise and thoughts, and I've loved the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. This is fun.
Well, this has been another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast, and we'll see you all next week.